After doing a podcast for almost 3 years with one of my best friends, the number one question I get asked is, how do you start a podcast? How do you start a YouTube channel? Well, let's find out. Well, first off, a lot of people think you need a whole bunch of super expensive equipment. People think you need a MacBook. They think you need an iPad. Hell, they even think you need an iMac or a $2,000 camera. The truth is, the first step to creating a podcast or YouTube channel is coming up with a concept. A lot of people want to create content, but they don't know what they want to create content about. With that being said, the first thing is the concept. What do you want to talk about? What do you want your YouTube channel to be about? Who do you want to reach? Whether it be people that are your peers in your age group, if you want to start a channel that is based around kids and you're only going to make content for children, there's a lot of variables that go into it. Once you have your concept, in my opinion, I would say you need to come up with a catchy name. The reason why, everybody has a name, but what's going to make your name stand out? For me, my very first podcast was Nosy with Good Intentions. And honestly, it was a phrase I used to say to people when I would ask questions that people would consider inappropriate, even though they didn't have bad intentions. So I would give them a caveat. Hey, I'm just asking. I'm just nosy with good intentions. So when people go to look up the name of your podcast or your YouTube channel, make sure it's something catchy. And when you come up with a name, make sure to Google and look it up on all the streaming platforms, on YouTube and anything else you can find. That way, you know if the name of your podcast that you've come up with is already out there. Because you wouldn't want somebody, say, if you had a podcast called Two Peas in a Pod. That's a pretty common phrase. So you'd make sure to go out and double check other people have that name as well. Secondly, I don't know if that's second. That might be third. But either way. Huh?
I said it sounds good.
Okay. You talking while I record doesn't help though. Great job, babe! So when you're deciding on the concept of your podcast, also you might want to make sure you know what you're going to talk about. Like I said earlier, if you're going to have a podcast or YouTube channel that's about for kids, make sure it's kid-friendly content. Make sure you can keep it going as well. Do you want it to be based on current events? Do you want to be based on whatever's in the middle of your head, the back of your mind, or whatever? I think that's the most important part, is making sure that you can be consistent, because anybody can do something once. The important part is, can you keep going even when you don't want to? It's almost like working out. So for myself, what I decided was, with my friend, when we started our podcast 3 years ago, we wanted to do whatever was actually in the back of our minds, different thoughts we had that came up throughout the workday. The reason why is because we wanted to make sure that our topics weren't tied to current events. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that whatever we talked about was not tied to current events and what was happening in that moment in time. Because in my opinion, think about it. If it happened 2 years ago, is anybody really going to go back and listen to something that happened 2 years ago? Maybe, maybe not. I think that people spend more time chasing current events. And once that current event is over, is it really current? Probably not. That's kind of why we stuck with talking about whatever we wanted to talk about at the time. But again, there's sports podcasts, there's comedy podcasts, there's comic book podcasts, there's TV review podcasts. There's all kind of content that you can put out there on the internet. Only thing is, you got to figure out what works for you. For me, I like talking about whatever's on my mind or whatever's on my heart. For others, they want to talk about the new hot topics. Some people like to be messy. So for episode 1, when you start off, make sure you have a concept. You don't need all this expensive crap. You just got to have a dream and a concept, and make sure you can be consistent. This is Michael, and you're streaming with sign language. Peace.